Hello and welcome into the Nittany Dispatch. I am John Sauber, Penn State football beat writer at the Center Daily Times. She is Audrey Snyder of The Athletic. And we are going to talk about what was a very long day for us, and I assume Penn State football fans.
You know, John, I think I need to start with an apology. Penn State gets the win 33-24 against Indiana, but I'm sorry. I said on our pre-game show last week that this was going to be a stress-free day for Penn State fans. They were going to waltz in there. I projected Penn State would win 45-3. Boy, were we wrong.
Yeah, I was going to say that's not a just you thing. That is very much a we thing.
Everybody,
I think I said 49-0, which very quickly was out of play when Indiana scored the first touchdown of the game. Before we get too far into it, though, as always, please rate, review, and subscribe. Hit that subscribe button below us on YouTube if you're watching. Leave 5-star ratings on Apple Podcasts. It all helps. Hit the subscribe button there as well. But yeah, this was it was one of the strangest games I think of this. Probably the strangest of the season. One of the strangest of the last few years. I don't even know where to start, right? Because the offense was, and probably has to start there. The offense was as bad as I can remember this year, Ohio State game included. Like, I thought this was easily for 58 minutes and 20 seconds, whatever it was, their worst offensive performance of the year.
Yeah, and I think too, John, like the thing that got me is, you show up to Beaver Stadium and you could absolutely sense that the crowd was on edge, and rightfully so, right? After last week, Penn State comes out, the offense isn't moving the ball. They were getting booed. I mean, this was
early.
Yes, they were getting booed early and often, even during the pregame intros. Drew Allar got like a nice ovation, but James Franklin did get some boos. And I think that was just like going into it, it was like, okay, I mean, James Franklin said it Wednesday night. We need to take our frustration out on somebody else. Well, the snowball theory was on high alert in the fourth quarter. That theory being after Penn State loses the first game of the season, the second one usually tends to follow shortly thereafter. I mean, it was bad. And the fact that Indiana strikes first with a 90-yard touchdown, John, like let's start there, right? The fact that this Penn State defense, top-ranked defense in the country, gives up touchdowns of 90, 69, and 26 yards to Indiana. Like, we're talking about the worst team in the Big Ten, most likely, although Maryland.
They fired their offensive coordinator a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I mean, like, this team is an absolute mess. And I think, again, when we go back, we grade and judge this season, everything is, well, is it good enough now to beat Michigan? This ain't good enough to beat most of the Big Ten. Like, I think if Penn State would have been playing probably just about any other team in the Big Ten, I think they lose the game. And credit to Indiana in some regards. Like, this was a team that didn't roll over. Like, clearly they came here motivated. Like, this, I think, could have been one of those season-defining moments for them for sure. But, man, yeah, this Penn State offense, I was surprised by how the defense had so many lapses and just straight-up blown coverages, and we'll get into that later. But as always, John, here we are talking about a Penn State offense and their shortcomings, whether after a win or a loss. That's kind of the consistent thing here.
Yeah, and it was interesting after the game. James Franklin obviously spoke to the media, and one of the things he mentioned when talking about Drew Allar is he mentioned that Drew, he mentioned his recovery after the interception late in the game where they end up scoring the game-winning touchdown to KeAndre Lambert-Smith shortly thereafter. He didn't really criticize Drew, and he went straight to the wide receivers need to get separation
again. Yep.
And they need to scheme up things offensively. And I think it is, and I don't want to speak for him, but I think it's pretty clear where he thinks the fault lies with what's going on with the offense. I don't think James Franklin believes Drew Allar's the problem. I think he believes, and I tend to agree with him, that the issue is the separation and that the issue is the play calling and the scheme itself. And this was something, so I was fortunate to watch some All-22 film last week after complaining that we don't have access to it. I found some. And was watching the Ohio State game, and I don't want to go back to that, but like,
John,
this was clear.
You're cutting open wounds for me.
I know, but it put me on higher alert that like today intentionally I tried to watch the receivers more downfield, and like, because you can always go back and watch the TV copy of, the quarterback and the offensive line and everything. But like, you really saw it again today. It looked a lot like Ohio State last week. Guys were not getting open downfield. There's very limited separation. It seemed like every time that they did get separation, the offensive line collapsed. it just felt like at no point could they get everything like to line up correctly on the same play. It was always the protection's there, separation's not, separation's there, the protection's not, or the other two things are there, and Drew is ruled right and the guy's open left. Like there was one play, Drew ruled to his left, and KeAndre Lambert-Smith was open on the right side of the field with no one near him. It's like, you can't ask him to throw it the entire way across the field and the entire way down the field. KeAndre has to roll with him to his left. And so it's like, it felt like it wasn't cohesive at any given moment, except for one play.
Here's what I think we learned today, John. I think looking again at this offense, what they have and the shortcomings and the flaws that we're seeing, that's what this offense is. That's not going to go away the rest of the season. I think last week we could kind of say, well, it's Ohio State. It was really bad, even though they were limited. No, I think what we saw today is what this team is. And I think, again, you're 8 games into this thing, right? Like this isn't game 2 or game 3. This is who you are. Drew Allar completed 20 of 31 passes, 210 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick. He was also sacked 3 times. The other part here, John, we talk about the receiving core. Harrison Wallace III gets hurt early, like midway through the first quarter, leaves. He's grabbing kind of at his right collarbone shoulder area, comes back with his arm in a sling. So I'm no doctor, but that is not a great sign. So that's why we saw, the uptick in play for Dante Cephas and Malik McClain. But again, like so much of what we kept hearing was, well, once we get Harrison Wallace back, the offense can be more explosive. And we really, like James Franklin said it so many times, they felt that was one of the biggest reasons why this offense was struggling. Well, now if you're without him again for any, significant amount of time, KeAndre Lambert-Smith and these tight ends are going to have to carry the load. And I struggle to see that being a recipe for success, especially against an elite team like Michigan. But yeah, I think the receiving core, it is what it is. But it's been not great.
Well, and what's interesting, you mentioned Malik McClain and Dante Cephas. I actually think McClain was the primary beneficiary of Wallace because we did not see much of today was Liam Clifford.
Yes,
I don't believe. Yeah, I don't believe. I have to. I will double check this later. I don't believe he played a single offensive snap this game.
Yeah, I haven't seen snap counts yet, but I did not see him. Limited role again too for Caden Saunders. Yes. Like I think
Cephas was. I think maybe it's like with Wallace healthy, it's like you have 1A and 1B and Wallace and KeAndre Lambert-Smith. I think it's probably pretty clear now that Cephas is the third guy, even with a gap between him and the top 2, but there's another gap between him and everyone else, because it seemed clear that like if Wallace was out there, it was probably going to be those 3 guys. And I know I say this all the time, and I apologize to anyone who's tired of hearing it, but I thought Cephas looked decent today. Like I didn't think he was getting a little bit more separation.
You are the lead conductor of the Dante Cephas hype train.
Listen,
like is he paying you, John? Like is this some NIL deal here where you keep
we were talking about this earlier. When I have opinions, I'm convicted in those things, right? Like, and I continue to see signs that like, and honestly, I think part of it is he's getting the benefit of some of these other guys just aren't doing it at all, right? Like Malik McClain, you feel for him. He transfers in. There's some level of expectations. There's no separation. Drew threw a perfect deep ball down the left sideline when they were moving toward the south end zone, and he had 0 separation and couldn't go get it. Like, and it was, he has been bad pretty much since the Illinois game.
When you mentioned McClain, so the big play, the play that everybody, wants to celebrate, that really probably the only thing people will remember from this game.
The tush push.
No, not that one, John. Of course not that one. The KeAndre Lambert-Smith, the 57-yard touchdown, right? 57? Yeah, 57-yard touchdown.
Yep.
That saves the game, effectively saves the season, or at least extends it a little bit longer with Michigan on the horizon. But if you go back and look at that, you have Malik McClain underneath. And Allar said, you know what? He's like, I knew I had 2 pretty good options because this is a play that they repped a lot this week. Theo Johnson was saying after the game, he's like, Drew and KeAndre stayed after practice all this week, that this was a look that they knew they were going to get. And that you mentioned the play earlier to McClain. That was the same play where Allar and McClain didn't connect, but it was the same play that they ended up scoring on late in the game with KeAndre Lambert-Smith. McClain was underneath, and then of course there's a flag on the defender who was on McClain actually on that critical play. So that moment massive. Like, kudos to KeAndre Lambert-Smith for just absolutely getting the job done. Really resilient moment for Drew Allar after throwing that first pick. But John, will this moment change anything for this offense? Like, have we unlocked anything now that Drew Allar has a pick out of the way? The fact that, they have this chunk play, will that change anything? Are you tuning the mic up? Is this a hot take coming?
No, tune the mic down a little bit before I get too loud here. But no, I think so. First, with the play, the play itself, I was down on the sideline when it happened. It was directly in front of me.
Okay.
It's one of those plays you look up and see the ball coming, and like you can't really tell the angle. You don't know if it's going to come toward you. But I tend to not move in those situations. Just eat the fact that I might get trucked on any given play. Which I'm big enough, I can take it.
But you were trying to test your insurance today.
Yeah, that's right. But it was coming toward me, and I looked down at KeAndre, and I remember he didn't really push off. He created some separation, but like he did a really good job of holding the defender like kind of behind him, and then taking that last extra step at absolute top speed at the last second to get that separation and going. I thought that was a phenomenal play by him. It was a great throw by Drew too, but I think it will not be talked enough about how good of a play it was by KeAndre to kind of time that up so perfectly. Now, as to whether it will be more, I wrote about this. Whether it will or it won't, it has to be. Otherwise, this means nothing, right? Like beating Indiana, all it changes then is from 10-2 to 9-3, or 9-3 to 10-2, right? Like, and I'm sure for Penn State fans, they want more than that, right? They want the college football playoff. They want to be a real contender of the Big Ten. But if it's not more, if it doesn't become anything else, then none of this matters, right? Then
it's one really good play,
right?
In a game that otherwise there were a lot of things that people are going to say could have been more.
Yeah, in a game that was atrocious from the offense, in a year that has mostly been bad by the offense, and it's just like the highlight of a down year, I guess, at that point. But I do think like the way it changes is if there is a confidence for Drew more than anything. I think that is it's the thing that is toughest to gauge, I think, when you're watching film, when you're watching anything like on replay or even live. But I felt like today, and maybe I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this, it felt like he was second guessing himself early in the game. Like he was maybe insecure in
maybe he doesn't trust decision making. Maybe he doesn't trust that they're going to be where he thinks they're going to be.
It was a lack of trust somewhat in himself, which that's natural after you lose a game like they did last week to Ohio State, and a lack of trust that we've seen all year with the receivers. So I think if you're hoping that this is something else, the hope is that this was it for Drew, that this clicked everything, that he's going to be confident, that he's going to take, maybe you don't want him to take, like, the idea that he needed to throw the interception is like, I don't think that's true. You need him, you need him to be confident enough to make those throws. You don't need him to actually throw the interception. Maybe
we don't need him to become a gunslinger all of a sudden, right?
But you need him to have the confidence to make those throws. And I think more than the interception is the response to it, showing like, I can still make this kind of throw. But yeah, I think it's interesting.
And Allar is such a tough person to get a read on just from a personality standpoint, because he's really calm, he's poised, he toes the company line. And, of course, at postgame, we're asking everybody, well, after Drew throws the pick, what's he like? And I'm sitting there listening to the audio because I was talking to KeAndre Lambert-Smith and some other guys. So I'm listening back to Drew afterward. And the funny thing was, he said he didn't even realize that he threw an interception there. That he just, because there was so much pressure in his face, which, again, he got hit, the offensive line. Not a great moment.
Not a great day, if we're being honest.
No, rough day at the office. But he gets hit, and so he's like, I go back to the sideline. He goes, it wasn't until I see the defense go out that I'm like, whoa, I just really threw a pick there. KeAndre Lambert-Smith said he was glad that Allar now kind of has the first interception.
I thought
out
that
of
was
the way.
Funny. But he actually subscribed to that line of thinking that he thought it was. That
it was he needed to get this pick out of the way. But then Drew said, he was like, yeah, I thought all this talk about me needing to throw a pick was really weird because kind of, at some point it's going to happen, but I should have never thrown the ball there. I should have, just ate the sack, kind of live to maybe flip the field there. But yeah, to me, John, there's still this disconnect with the receiving core. And then if you subtract Harrison Wallace from it, it's going to be tough sledding. But you're going to have to continue to rely on these tight ends, I think. And like, there's more there, but man, this offense is so it's tough to watch. And this is the thing that, I mean, you're looking at an Indiana run defense that is absolutely horrible. Penn State, of course, sacks are factored into this, but they finish averaging 3.1 yards per carry. Like, never in my wildest dreams did I think that this Penn State offense would struggle this much against Indiana.
The sack adjusted number is 3.9 yards per carry. It's still like, that's fine. It's terrible against this bad of a run defense, though.
And they've played several bad run defenses this year. And that's why, like, I kind of cautioned when we did our midweek thing. I was like, well, maybe they'll get it back over 100, but also like, maybe not, because we've seen it before. Now, Katron Allen, 18 carries, 81 yards. Nick Singleton, 15 carries for 50 yards. Singleton was definitely a factor in the passing game. He was targeted 7 times, had 5 receptions for 31 yards,
including
with a long
one pretty
28.
bad drop too.
Yes, also a bad drop. John, moving forward, who should be your primary running back?
Katron. I said it like
I agree with you now. I did not agree with you before on this, but I think at this it has to be.
I'm continually surprised. The thing that gets me most with these, like Singleton should absolutely get like 10 to 12 carries a game. That's not like, I don't think that's really up for discussion. I think the issue is that
unless it's Ohio State, then he only got 9. But
yeah, true. But I think Katron is the better receiving back. Like, and I don't understand.
We're not seeing that. Yeah,
I know it doesn't. I feel like I'm missing something, right? Like when I go back and watch it, like I just must be flat out missing something or not understanding something.
Or maybe it's something at practice that we're not seeing, like right? Maybe
that
in practice
exactly.
he's not catching the ball or something. Who knows?
Yeah, because Katron in games is clearly their best receiving back, and he's their best pass blocking back. Maybe Trey Potts a little better there, but you're not starting Trey Potts. But I think that not seeing it in practice thing is something that I think kind of might be holding him back. I know what I'm going to say is going to sound really weird and probably counterintuitive, but I think some of these guys that aren't doing it in practice, that they know have the talent, presumably, we don't know this for sure who they're talking about when they say they're not seeing it in practice, presumably someone like Caden Saunders. I think you just need to let them play in a game, because some guys just look better in games than practice. We've talked, like Bo Prabula would be this type of quarterback that would look better in a game than in practice. And like, I think you just need to try at this point, because, you know, they're going to miss Trey Wallace, no doubt about that. He also wasn't separating as well as you'd like either. Like, that was one of the big things against Ohio State.
And you've already played a big portion of the season without him. Like, that's the other part.
Yeah. And no one is stepping up, but they're also, when they're rotating in, they're rotating guys that I feel really confident aren't up to snuff, right? Like Malik Mega and Malik McClain are awesome special teamers. I am confident at this point that they are not Big Ten quality starting wide receivers right now. I'm confident that the same is true with Liam Clifford. It seems that Penn State may also feel the same way with his lack of offensive snaps, whether he had none or limited or what have you. Looks like Cephas will be getting a chunk of the empty snaps. I just like, I don't understand. And again, maybe they're just so convicted in that you have to show it in practice to do it in a game. I don't understand why someone like Caden Saunders just isn't getting.
That's the one to me that I don't understand, especially because, again, like I'm with you at this point. Like, just keep trying other stuff, because what you're rolling out there consistently isn't working.
The touchdown he scored against Ohio State, by the way, this was one of my big takeaways when I watched that all 22. He ran a whip route on the play, which essentially you start running it out and you whip back to the middle of the field. It ended up being a broken play and he had to run the whole way across the field. But the whip route itself, like, he lost that corner. That corner was in hell. Like, he just had no idea where Saunders went, and Saunders was open, but Drew had to roll out, so the play drifts to the right. But it was one of those things where it's a very small thing. It's a not overly complex route, although they can be difficult because of the footwork. It's one of those things where you watch it and you're like, man, it's one rep. Not every rep's going to look like this. But I have to think, if he can create separation in a phone booth like that, that he can do it downfield, or that he can do it in the middle of the field. And like, the fact that he's not getting the opportunity to do it, like, it just, to me, it just absolutely has to be that he's not doing it in practice, because he's the one wide receiver, I think, that you would agree with this, and a lot of other people would too, that we're pretty surprised he's not gotten a larger opportunity this year.
Yeah, and especially because they were so complimentary of him as a punt returner early on, right? But here's my other
Right.
John. You've had some, you're leaning into a little bit of your more fiery, crazy takes. Well, I've got one here. Scorching hot.
That's what I'm here for. Audrey would start Jackson Smolik.
You know what? No, gosh, no, that's not where I'm going. Not yet, not yet. I'm not there yet. Daquan Hardy. A little jet sweep action with Daquan Hardy. Why
I
not?
totally agree with this.
Why
I was going to
not?
bring this up later. I didn't know we were going to do this
like,
early.
I think what we're seeing with him, I mean, right, he had the punt return that gets called back today on the Colin Dinkins special teams penalty. So you have that, and I'm just thinking, like, man, get the ball in this guy's hands. Like, even we talk so much about all of the gadget plays that they came up with at Ohio State. Like, have they not seen anything? And, like, I understand the punt return stuff. Like, you're not going to see him return live reps in practice. But, like, what have they been doing with this guy for the last several years? Like, has he never shown this in practice? Or maybe I'm just way far off my rocker on this one. But I think you got to give it a shot.
This is one of the things that gets me, like, I think you're right. I think even if it's like 3 snaps a game, you know what I mean? Just give him a chance to try and get the ball in his hands offensively. But they keep going to guys that I think they feel are maybe safer options, the best way to phrase it. Like guys like Tyler Warren, who is I think he's a starting level tight end, like him and Theo Johnson, both. Theo Johnson a little better, more upside. But these guys that aren't great separators, right? These guys that you can trust, in short areas and things like that. Frankly, like I think Trey Wallace probably falls into that group too right now, just because he hasn't been as explosive this year. But and Liam Clifford absolutely falls into this bucket of guys who aren't as explosive, but like the idea is that you trust them, they're consistent. Of course, he had the drops against Ohio State that I wonder how much that impacted this week. But they keep going to these guys where maybe they're more comfortable with the baseline, where I think at this point you have to kind of swing for the fences a little bit. That's why the explosiveness, I don't think, is going away. The explosiveness isn't going to show up as long as they consistently stay in 12 personnel, or at most you're putting 2 separators out there. What I mean by that is 2 guys who will create space on their own without necessarily needing it to be schemed up for them, because it's 2 receivers, right? Tight ends just don't do that unless they're like Kyle Pitts or Travis Kelce, who's out there freelancing all the time. Yeah, like it just doesn't happen. That's right, as you know him. But no, I think they need more guys that can separate on their own and create more on their own. And 12 personnel makes that a lot tougher, especially at the college level.
Yeah, no, I think that is a really good point. And I just, who you have at this point is who you have. But I think you got to maybe get a little more creative with the personnel that you do have. Because again, John, like what you rolled out today was not good offensively, especially, and defense. There's some stuff there. Like this was really bad. So running that back to me next week would just be like a sign of we're just going to keep doing the same things over and over. That's not good enough. That is not going to be good enough for Michigan for sure. And at what point do you start peeking ahead? Because this sport, you're always looking ahead. You got to start thinking about 2024 and who are some of these guys that you have, because we know your receiving core is going to have problems again next year, right? Unless you get something in the portal. Right. Who knows? KeAndre Lambert-Smith, his future, right? Like who knows there? Like this receiving core, something's got to sort itself out here in the next, 8 or so months. So I think you do need to start doing that. I would imagine, but I don't even feel confident saying this, because I would say I'd imagine against Maryland, who lost to Northwestern today, that we see some of these other guys. Maybe Penn State gets a little more creative. But at this point, John, like we can't even bank on any of that, because it's just this offense is so erratic. To me, it is the thing that every week I cannot wrap my head around it. It almost feels like this team that we watched in the Rose Bowl, like that this is just a completely different team. And I don't know how or why. I don't know what exactly completely happened. I feel like, I'm going to say it, I feel like every game now at some point, someone in the press box says it. A lot of it is in jest. But some of it is like, well, would they be in this game with Sean Clifford? And I was like, oh, please, let's not do this again. But there is certainly a disconnect, that trust issue with the receiving core and Allar, and we just keep seeing it week after week. And so I have no reason to believe that it's going to get drastically better here in the next month.
Let's take a brief break from the podcast to tell you about the good folks at Voodoo Brewery State College. It's Voodoo Brewing Company State College at 201 Elmwood Street. People that you and I have gotten to know fairly well, as we are frequenters of Voodoo. When I say good people, I mean it. Dots and Wes down there, among the many other staff members they have down there, great people with good beer and frankly, a great environment year round.
Get you a Mimosa, get you a good vibes. Those are my two go-tos, because I can't just have one go-to. Also cocktails, John. I think we've probably tried everything there. I think it's safe to say we've tried
slushies
everything.
At times.
Slushies, yeah.
Seltzers.
Water. They do have water. Great setup. I love the atmosphere there. And as we are transitioning into winter here in State College, the temperatures are dropping in a hurry around here. So you can also go inside as well and enjoy kind of the overview there. But right now you got the leaves falling outside. So just a great spot, great beers, good times, trivia, bingo, all things that we never went at, but we always have fun.
That's right, because you and I are losers. But the trivia every Tuesday, bingo every Thursday, a lot of fun. You mentioned the cold weather. It's going to be fire pit season when the weather gets cold. So you have fire pits down there to create an even better, like, personally, I honestly, like, I know everyone loves, and I do too, the outdoor environment in the summer and stuff, but when they have the fire pits when it's cold out, like, I think that's like one of the most fun times to be there, because you don't get that, right? Like, you can get outdoor environments. You can't get an outdoor environment like Voodoo specifically. Like I said, the fire pits are fantastic and make you feel like you know what I mean? Like you're with your friends around the bonfire. Which
you know what it feels like, John?
What's that?
Good vibes. Good vibes all around.
Always good vibes at Voodoo Brewing Company, located at 201 Elmwood Street in State College. Well, I think the biggest difference between this year's team and last year's with the Sean Clifford thing is he's throwing to Parker Washington and Mitch Tinsley.
Yeah.
Right? Like, KeAndre was the third guy, and KeAndre's gotten better for sure. Mm-hmm. But KeAndre was the third guy in that offense. There is no one ahead of him now, and it is just him at this point, especially with Trey hurt. I'm with you. I think, like, I don't even think it's like, oh, you need to build for the future. By the way, where is Amari Evans? What is going on?
No
with
idea.
Amari Evans. I still don't fully understand.
Spring game
Talk about a separator. Arguably, like, one of the best.
He might still be doing push-ups on the sideline from the spring game, for all we know.
Yeah, true.
I mean, I know you're right. I mean, because there is someone, I believe he had an injury tweak in the preseason, and
he's played reps at times. Like, he's late in games, and we see him at practice. He's there practicing in full. From what we can see, to be clear, it's a 20-minute window of limited reps. We see him practicing. Like, I just cannot imagine that, Tyler Johnson, Christian Driver, like, all of these guys are
Anthony
not
Ivy
fit to play. Anthony Ivy,
Carmelo Taylor, which again, young guy, so you kind of skewed. Okay,
Taylor's.
I get that,
it's a true. He's a true freshman. You can be like, okay, it's different with him.
But his nickname's Hellcat, so just for the fun of it, turn Hellcat loose, nickname. Right? How good's that?
And his whole thing is like how he plays with the ball in the open field and his speed and athleticism. But I think all of those guys, like, you mean to tell me with this bad of a receiving core, with this little depth in the receiving core, playing two guys in both Malik's, McLean, and Mega that are primary special teamers who aren't great at receiver, you mean to tell me that none of those guys can even get snaps right now?
Yeah.
Like, I don't, again, like, there just has to be so much going on behind the scenes that we don't see, but I feel like at some point you've just got to give them reps. And, like, it's not, I said this a lot last year because I said last year that I thought Drew should be starting over Sean. Because I thought it helped him most last year reach their ceiling.
That's Packers backup quarterback Sean Clifford, for those who
That's right. And that is said by Packers fan Audrey Snyder, of course.
Shareholder.
That's true. But I think, like,
Sean works
it's not about preparing for the future as in next year. It's about preparing for the future as in Michigan. Yep. And, like, giving yourself the best chance. I know they want to go 1-0. They want to focus on this week. Part of going undefeated is being at your best in the toughest games, right? It's not, I mean, obviously you have to beat Indiana, you have to beat UMass and West Virginia and all of these teams, but you also have to be ready to beat those other teams And right now, with the status quo, with this receiving group that they're currently putting out there, they're not going to beat Michigan. Like if this is the group, if it's just KeAndre Lambert-Smith, Dante Cephas, and they're in 12 personnel a bunch, they're not going to beat Michigan. Like I don't want to be like so grim about it, but I think you'd be hard pressed to find someone who would disagree given what we saw at Ohio State in this week. They absolutely have to find someone that can contribute. Maybe it's Cephas takes that step finally and from a comfort standpoint, and Allar trusts him. Maybe it's Caden Saunders gets reps. Maybe it's Tyler John, whomever. Like it's somebody has to
pick a name out of a head.
Yeah, pick any of these receivers. Somebody has to be able to allow them go to 11 personnel more consistently. Otherwise, like we're going to be talking the same refrain after Michigan that we did after the Ohio State game.
Yeah, and the Drew Allar's 57-yard completion, the catch and run to KeAndre Lambert-Smith, that was the longest Penn State pass play since week 1 when they had the 72-yard against West Virginia. And during
I don't even
that
remember
same
that
span,
play.
Oh, I do.
It feels like it was 3 years ago.
It does feel like a long time ago, but during the coming out of the bye week, I did like a mid-season review, and so I went back and looked at it. And between that play and this afternoon, Penn State had no pass play go more than 35 yards. So again, like this is rough. And I think too, John, like you look at all of this and you say, well, Penn State's we knew that the defense was going to have to carry the load here in special teams. And then today, I think you start to see, okay, well, if when these other phases falter, you're kind of screwed, right? Because you don't have much to fall back on with this offense. And to me, I was able to make it down the field, to go down the terrifying steps at the end of the game, get on the field.
No,
for the last
I did not know you had to do this. Hold on, this is a separate conversation. Are you serious?
Yes, I went down the steps.
I would have stayed in the press box. I would have not. Why did you have to go down the steps?
Because it was the final 3 minutes, so they hold the elevators for the coaches.
Oh no!
There were some Penn State fans who, on the press box side, were also trying to get down, and they were like, "These stairs, can we take these?" And I was like, "Listen, if you're afraid of heights, do not do this. I am only doing this because I have no choice, and I'm up to date on all my tetanus boosters, and I hope you are too, because it is an absolute terrifying, rickety, rusty set of stairs that you have to wind all the way down to get down to the field."
And
this is what I do for the people. It is high. I try not to look down. I do not like it at all.
I will. I promise you. You and I did this. I think it was last year when it was rainy and wet, and I had you put my laptop in your backpack because I thought I was worried I was going to drop it, and I can feel the anxiety right now that I felt then. I will never go down those steps again. They could say the press box is falling down. The only way is down the steps. I'm going down with the press box.
Going down with the ship.
Yeah.
It is. It's not a great experience. So whenever we talk about stadium renovations and the places that really need to be upgraded, I will tweet out a picture of those steps because it is absolutely terrifying. But I made it down to the field for the last minute and a half. So I missed the safety. That's when I was making my way down to the field. But to me, the celebration afterward from Penn State, it felt very muted. This wasn't the, oh my gosh, we just won because we had this 57-yard touchdown late in the game. This is so great. To me, this felt like we just eked out a win against Indiana. Okay, sure, 1-0 mentality, all that. But this was not an overly over-the-top celebratory scene. And I feel like, John, if you're James Franklin, I think you have to realize right now that this is where you're at. This is the reality of this season. Yes, he can come into us and, say that the touchdown's awesome and this and that, and that's great. And I expect that he's going to say that, but deep down inside, he knows, right? He has to know, everything that we're seeing, they're seeing it. They're seeing it every day. I think they have to be driving themselves mad trying to figure out what to do, especially with this offense.
Yeah, and you mentioned the muted celebration. So Drew Allar was doing the TV interviews and stuff afterward, and you saw him, and the interviewers were trying to, you know what I mean, almost cheer him up, get him to smile for the interview. He was, and he was didn't seem interested, but was having a hard time doing it because he was I think a little frustrated maybe with how he played. Again, don't want to speak for him or how he felt, but then you saw him finally teammates would come up to him and he started there were some more smiles, there were more laughs, and I think he allowed himself to enjoy it. But I saw one of the things I was watching, and you can this was my lead to my story. You can find it over at centerdaily.com. James was like not kind of having it at all. Like he was pretty stoic when he was walking off. It took Pat Kraft, Penn State athletic director Pat Kraft, coming up to him and like trying to like talk to him. And I wasn't close enough to hear what he was saying, but he was like putting his arm around him, like trying to cheer him up, like shit. You know what I mean? Like doing normal stuff. Like, come on, man, like just enjoy it, kind of stuff. But yeah, I thought, and James finally like smiled. You know what I mean? Allowed himself to kind of enjoy it. But I think that's kind of a sign of they know where this is, and they know that it's not bleak, but like they have 13 days now to get it right. And math is hard.
We'll go with that.
We'll
go with
13,
that. Sure,
whatever.
2 weeks.
They have 2 weeks to get it right. And if they don't, again, you and I will sit here and have this same discussion. And then that discussion turns into a discussion in early December after they end up at, as Johnny McGonigal of Penn Live said, in the Cotton Bowl against Air Force, right? Like
you know who coaches the wide receivers at Air Force, John?
That's right, Taylor Stubblefield. That would be
a hell of a juicy storyline for us.
That man would be bombarded with interviews all week from all of us.
I pulled up a quote from my story on The Athletic when you mentioned Drew Allar and that he didn't seem too enthused. One of the things he said post-game, he said, "We were not perfect in any phase today, and we're the first to admit that. This was definitely not as clean as we would have liked on the offensive end, but at the end of the day, we found a way to win." And I think, like, for as much as, the UMass celebration was, we're focused on UMass and we're not looking ahead to Ohio State, today it was kind of like, we knew this was not good enough in all three phases, but they're not going to say that Indiana is, not a great opponent. So they praised Indiana and all these things that they are supposed to say. But John, to me, the surprise, because the offense is what it is at this point. To me, the surprise was the defense giving up the 3 big touchdowns. The manner in which these touchdowns happened, like this, like you could have told me before the game, you said, Audrey, you know what? The Penn State offense is going to struggle today. And I'd say, sure, we've seen some things. Sure. But Audrey, the defense is going to give up touchdowns of 90, 69, and 26 yards. I would have said, John, you're absolutely crazy. And yet here we are.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think of those 3 touchdowns, the shortest one was the worst one, right? Because the 90-yarder was
69 was pretty bad. That was the blitz. Johnny Dixon came. There was no safety there. Blown coverage, that's correctable. That
right,
can get
to
fixed.
Me, right. I think that's the big thing here. That very nice touchdown by Indiana, I think, was like a clear miscommunication where, and James laid this out for us post game. So I appreciated him doing that. Essentially, it's a read blitz where the corner or the linebacker is supposed to blitz based on, how what formation they come out and what they see from the offense, and both blitzed, right? And it seemed like Johnny Dixon was not supposed to blitz there, right? Like based on the look, it should have been Curtis Jacobs and not Dixon. Again, I'll have to go back and watch it. But then Jalen Reed tried to save it late, right? Because at first it looks like a corner blitz where Reed should be rotating over anyways. But he doesn't rotate over, which leads me to believe that Dixon was the one who maybe should have been staying home there. And then Brendan Sorsby, to his credit, sees it. Hits Donovan McCulley, who takes to the house for a touchdown. The 90-yarder was really strange, and I'm curious to watch this again. It looked like Indiana had 2 receivers running in the same area, which is not a thing you design on offense. And I think it also, like, it was kind of so incorrect that it confused Penn State, and they couldn't figure out what was going on. And so I think, like, honestly, I think someone on it, and I don't know this, but I think someone on Indiana's offense made a mistake, and then it kind of caused Penn State to make an inexcusable mistake, mind you, but a mistake, and then they get caught for a 90-yard touchdown. But yeah, I think like those 2 mistakes are, like you said, they're correctable. They're not things you should do in games. They're not things they should do against Indiana, to be clear. I'm not excusing the defense. Those 2 plays should not be touchdowns. But the shortest touchdown was a long Indiana drive where they kind of took control of the field. They were able to move the ball, not at will, but like pretty well. Penn State couldn't get stops in the running game or passing game. Like that was a drive to me where it looked like Indiana is better than Penn State on this drive. Whereas the other 2 touchdowns, it was like Penn State made mistakes that Indiana took advantage of. That last drive was more concerning because there was another one that Indiana drove down the field and they missed a field goal, right? Like if they didn't make
Yes.
that, if that was a
That
mistake at
was
the end.
the Daquan Hardy sack, and then they missed
Yes.
37-yard field goal, which ended
Yes.
up being a hindsight pretty big moment.
Yeah, and but up until that sack, like Indiana was
Mhm.
controlling that drive too, and so you have these two drives. I think, as odd as it sounds, but I think the two drives that accounted for a total of 7 points were more concerning than the two drives that accounted for 14 because of the way that it happened, and because that is like Maryland isn't going to look at the film of this game, look at the two missed assignments, and be like, "This is something we're going to catch them in," because Penn State probably doesn't make that mistake twice. They'll learn from it. It's the other drives that they'll watch and be like, this is how we replicate success against this defense.
You know, it was concerning, John.
Most of this game.
Tom Allen after the interception.
Yeah.
1st and 10 at the Penn State 22. They come out, the shotgun, run for 1 yard, right? Then they rush left for 1 yard. 3rd and 8, rush middle for 2 yards.
This man stressed me out.
Tell me you don't trust your quarterback. Like, at least take a shot to the end zone. Like,
you don't trust your quarterback, who was awesome today.
Yes.
Like, who was like now had some stuff gift wrapped.
You're playing with house money and what, a $20 million buyout. So, like,
yeah,
do it, man.
Literal house money.
Like, literally, to me, that was just from a football standpoint. That was egregious. So then, they come out, they hit the 35-yard field goal, which, I mean, the kid already missed from 37. So,
right. That's the other thing. You're not even guaranteeing yourself 3 points there. So at this point, I was already down on the field. And like I said, I was like, it was stressing me out, the decisions he was making, because I get like, we're all football fans and everything.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not used to seeing someone turtling up that aggressively.
Massive turtle.
Yeah, we were talking about this in the press box. He won against Penn State. Sorry to bring this game up. He won against Penn State because they were so aggressive. They were aggressive in every decision they made that game. And now you have a chance to do it again in Beaver Stadium in front of fans when that 2020 game, there were no fans in attendance. And you run it 3 times? What are we doing?
Yeah, I just drew a turtle on my box score here right next to that sequence with a boo next to it.
Just to identify it easier. Yeah, and it's not just Allen, by the way. It's Rod Carey, their offensive coordinator.
Hot Rod.
Replaced
Kraft hired at Temple.
That's right. And who replaced Walt Bell a few weeks ago when they fired Bell. And like you mentioned, the other thing, though, Tom Allen has a $20 million buyout. We're not entirely certain, I think, as a college football world, that Tom Allen is going to be coaching Indiana next year. Like if I'm in that position and I feel like there's a chance, even if it's like a 5% chance that I'm coaching for my job, I'm trying to win that game because it gets a lot harder, to lose your job when you upset a top 10 team in the country.
Yeah, to me, that was just like one of those sequences that I'm like that is just, we've seen some things today, and that was egregious.
Playing not to lose.
Yes, like that was really, really bad. I will say, from an injury standpoint, Penn State was without Chop Robinson today. He was ruled out. I did not even see him there on the sideline. So again, we'll have to see that moving forward. Vengo Iwane started at left guard, but JB Nelson did play. It was kind of like they were rotating. And then we saw right tackle Caden Wallace got banged up. So we saw a lot of Drew Shelton today. I don't know what Wallace's status will be moving forward. You had Harrison Wallace the third in there. All things considered, John, Penn State squeaks out of this game. The health front's not looking or sounding too great. I think when you came into today, we were all thinking, well, this is a get-right game. They come in, blow the doors off, get Bo Pribula some reps, and like none of that materialized.
Bo Pribula got some reps. He did get some reps.
He got a few reps at the end. He did get some reps. But yeah, to me, like you look at it and you say, okay, Jalen Reed with the interception, like that was a big play, momentum shifting play. KJ Winston recovers the muffed punt. Like that was another play. But the defense and special teams are going to have to be better because the offense just has so many flaws. And I do wonder, John, at some point, and maybe we're here, maybe we're not, I don't know. But at some point, does the Penn State defense say, like, we've done all we can do offense, like we've seen enough, we're tired of it? Like, because otherwise, it's like, how do you come out in a game like today and you just see the defense give up these kinds of plays and the offense really couldn't do much?
Yeah.
And to me, that was just, it seemed like again, the Penn State coming off a loss, the snowball theory was on high alert. And like, why does that consistently happen with James Franklin teams, right? And yes, some of it has been the opponents that they've played after the first loss, but like also that was when the 9 overtime game happened, was the same kind of situation. So to me, like, it's just one of those things that you look at and you say, like, what is it with this team, or this program, rather, not even this team, in certain scenarios?
Well, I think if they get to a point where it feels like, and I don't know that they will, where the defense is like kind of just done, like
Mhm.
exhausted, like done all they
Yeah.
can. I think it'll be pretty obvious when we get to that point. I don't
Yeah.
think we're there yet.
Yeah.
Um, I think, but I
I
do think
think
you're right. I
depending
think
what
it's
happens after Michigan, I think then that's when you see, right? Like, because
be curious to see what happens against Rutgers and Michigan State. Tell you that much, right? Like, because those
yeah,
are
yeah,
not good
that's because I was,
offenses. They're
yeah.
really bad offenses, and if like either of those teams scores a decent amount on them, I think maybe there are signs there. But I do think you mentioned the offensive line, talking about JB Nelson's health and everything. They, I probably underestimated his value earlier in the year when I
Mhm.
rewatched the film of Ohio State. When I watched again, that kind of allowed me to key in on some stuff today. Venga Ioane is just kind of not ready. He had some good plays, but in the running game, like JB Nelson is like clearly a difference maker for them. In part because he's good, in part I think because Ioane is kind of not as ready as you'd like him to be. And I wonder how much of the running struggles are attributed to not
Mhm.
having Nelson in there full time. The
Although
last
when
few
he was
games
in
at
there
least.
earlier, they struggled too. I mean, I think,
For sure. But they were
yeah,
also like
yeah,
they were there against like Iowa, and it's like, okay, like
yeah.
it's Iowa. You
You
know what I
can buy,
mean?
yeah.
And like they had found some success earlier in the year, but he was pretty much out for Northwestern. He was out for Ohio State, he was out for UMass, and like UMass different, pretty much discount all of it. But like Ohio
No, no,
State, like
no, 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 John. Winning is hard. We're gonna
that's
celebrate
right.
every win around
Well,
here.
that week it wasn't.
Yeah, that
Uh
was.
but I think they are missing Nelson in these key matchups, maybe where they have better defensive tackles that they're facing. Uh, and that's like they struggled against Illinois, but it's like Jer'Jon Newton's pretty good. Like he's like, you know what I
Amazing,
mean? Like
amazing
that's a different level of defensive tackle that you're
animal.
facing where it's like tough to expect a ton from JB Nelson. So I do think though, like they need him more than maybe I had thought originally. And I'll be curious to see if and when eventually, if he gets back to being back full time, if that changes anything at all. It did not feel like the offensive line played well. It's really that I will say that's the hardest position to judge like live because
You
that's the
got to
one
go
you need to
back and
see it, and
yeah,
you kind of have to rewatch. Like you have to rewatch the play like 3 times to make sure you're understanding what you're seeing from every assignment, and what you're because you're trying to gauge what their assignments are. If they're sliding protection, if you know what I mean. If there's a stunt, who's supposed to be picking up? Do they need to hit someone and then pass them off to the next guy? Right, like that's the stuff you really have to do the rewatch for. But I did not, on first glance, on the initial on the live viewing, like did not feel like that they were playing at a high level today. Um, Honestly, it felt like no one played at a high level today outside of Daquan Hardy, if we're being honest.
yeah,
Even KeAndre like had his down moments.
yeah. That
Katron was
drop was
pretty
bad.
good.
That drop, and I think,
The bad
and this
drop.
is something, and Lambert-Smith even touched on it. Actually, let me pull this quote up because as he said it, I could feel my face like changing. Because he came up with this, or he didn't. Marcus Hagens, the receivers coach, had this analogy. And one of the things with Lambert-Smith early on in his career was after a drop, he'd kind of get in his head and he wouldn't
Yep.
wouldn't rebound back. And he was really honest, throughout the offseason telling us that. Um, but
Thought he was honest today too when he talked about it.
he said today, he said, I'm never nervous about dropping the ball. Of course, he had the one clank off his hands in the first half. He goes, Coach Hagens gave me a good analogy. I'll never forget it. He said, when you get in a car, you don't think about crashing. As a receiver, you don't think about dropping the ball. Drops happen and I got to live with them, but I don't like them. Well, as he said the car crash, like I could just hear I could see my face chest. I was like, where is he going with this? Like,
I was like, this is getting very serious very
yeah, and
quickly.
I was like, I hope you've never been in a car crash. I've never been in one.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I didn't know where he was going with that, but he landed the plane,
Yes.
and he got the point across. And I think that's how Lambert Smith grows and develops the rest of the season. To me, like that is a massive storyline because not only for
Yeah.
this year, but what happens with the NFL, right? Is he here next year? Is he elsewhere? I don't know, but once the calendar turns to November, that's usually when we start asking those questions.
Yep.
and guys start thinking about their futures. And so for me,
Honestly,
like,
it's after that second loss, whenever it happens,
yeah.
because it has happened every year
Oh
recently.
yeah,
Like,
and that's when
it's
you
after that
start.
second loss that's when you start to wonder.
And so it makes you wonder, kind of where things stand with Lambert Smith. I'm not sure, but yeah, John,
Yeah,
Maryland week now. I think is, I don't even know
it's
what to say anymore because
well, and
you're
Maryland
going
loses
on
to
the road.
Northwestern.
They lose to Northwestern. I believe the game was in Evanston. I believe.
Yes.
They lose that game. Who knows with Maryland, right? Like this is for a Maryland
Well, and
team.
like,
This is the kind of game that makes their season. Penn
yes, it's
State.
their Super
Yep.
Bowl. Like, it is everything to them. And again, we see it every single week. I know I said this a lot last week after the Ohio State game, but just to go through it all again, like, everyone is susceptible every single week. Oklahoma
Mhm.
lost to Kansas today with their backup quarterback. Kansas' backup quarterback.
Yeah.
Ohio State is tied 10-10 just out of halftime with Wisconsin right now. Like, it's a weird sport. Football is it's a one-off. It's not like,
Would you
other
would you
sports
like
where
to
there's a
say
massive
anything
sample.
to your new Ohio State fans who you've ruffled some feathers and you're just
Listen,
gonna let them go?
I think their defense is awesome. What do you want?
Did
Like,
Kyle McCord? Did you throw a pick? I think McCord, I believe.
he's thrown two.
Oh, he
So
thrown two. Okay, so I
yes.
haven't seen any of it. Yeah.
But no, and Braylon Allen got hurt just before the half before Wisconsin.
Ooh.
But they came out of halftime and scored pretty quickly here. But yeah, it's like Ohio State has an elite defense. I saw a lot of like you and I were not giving enough credit for Ohio. To
No, it
Ohio
was
State's
you, John. It
defense.
was you. They
Yeah,
were fine with me.
sorry,
It was you.
that's all
It was
me.
you.
That's my fault. But no, Ohio
I
State
would
has an elite
never
defense.
shortchange the Buckeyes.
Personally, I would try not giving up 10 points to Wisconsin, though. But no, I do think, like, obviously, Ohio State is an incredible defense. They deserve a lot of credit for why Penn State was bad last week. But as we found out this week, you know who else deserves a lot of credit for Penn State's bad offense? Penn State. Like, it is not a good group. They are, it's not
It's
a
true.
fully
It's
running
true.
group at this point, right? Like, they feel like it's all an uphill battle.
But you know what? You know what we did learn today, John? Something else.
What's that?
We learned.
Everyone else on here learned that I'm terrified of heights with that. I'm still
And
getting
I'm up
chills
to
from
date
you,
on
the
my
fact that
tetanus
you
shots.
yeah, I'm still getting chills with the fact that you actually did that today. I did not know that.
The 57-yard touchdown. Maybe Penn State was sitting on that, right? Maybe that was the explosive element that they just kept waiting to unleash.
They were saving it for the Hoosiers.
Yeah,
Something tells me that ain't true.
Yeah, I don't think. I will say though, Theo Johnson, his touchdown. I did want to mention this because I thought this was a really good anecdote. He had said that every Sunday they practice cover zero checkdowns, and
Yep.
when it happened today, he's like, "Yep, this is exactly what we do." So they were very well prepared for that. So that is a credit to Mike Yurcich. Obviously, they kept seeing something with the KeAndre Lambert-Smith touchdown. That's the look they expected to get and knew how to exploit it, and they did. So
And
again, that is
KeAndre and Theo
a
both
credit
said
to
like
him.
that is like what it looks like when they run it on air during practice. They
Mhm.
both said it. Like KeAndre said it felt like when he ran it on air. Theo said that it looked like
Yep.
when KeAndre ran it on air. So like that's preparation, that's coaching, right? That is a credit to Mike Yurcich. Still don't think it was a great day at the office, but like
Yeah.
the like you're kind of grasping, not you, but like the royal you are like grasping
Mhm.
at straws for like positives with this offense and with the play calling, and like I think you just got to take the wins when you can get them as a Penn State fan. Like if fans like are looking for positives in the offense and reasons to believe in the Mike Yurcich offense, I think it's that stuff. But yeah, it's still, I still think, and James, like I mentioned that quote earlier about what James said about like the, you know what I mean? Like the creating separation and stuff like that.
Yes.
He said, we've got to continue to work at creating separation, getting open at tight end and wide receiver to help with those things. And I think we've got to do everything we possibly can from a scheme standpoint as well. That's point blank. That's not a glowing endorsement. Like it's
no, and
that's the nicest way to turn.
And we've heard that. I mean, that's the last few weeks he's been saying, the same things. And so, I'm curious, kind of who we hear from this week, what the perspective is, because so much of this week was we got to flush Ohio State, we have to move on. Well, obviously there was definitely an Ohio State hangover on the field today,
for sure.
Whether they want to admit it or not, I think we all saw what we saw. But John, is there anything else that we have not hit on today
No, just that I'm annoyed that this game is at 3:30 on Saturday. Like the ultimate,
yeah.
just
Yeah,
the worst
yeah,
time for this to
that's
be.
it was nice to get a noon kick today. The weather was
Yeah,
mostly
I'm
great.
usually
It did rain a little bit, but
I'm usually anti-noon kick because, as most people know me know, I'm a night owl. Like I'm just up
yeah.
until like 4 a.m. usually, and I wake up at like probably like 9 o'clock most days, uh, which is not a healthy sleep schedule. But
I keep
like I
regular
would,
people hours, yeah.
that's probably the smart thing to do.
Mhm.
But I still prefer a night game, but I think I definitely like noon is easily the second, and catching up to a night game. I just like want my morning or I want the night. You know what I mean? Like you want to be able to decompress on some level, and
Yeah.
3:30 ain't that. But we will be at Maryland on Saturday. We will be here
We'll be
again, of
there.
course, recording before then, following a press conference from James, which is hopefully on
We think
Tuesday.
is Tuesday. Yeah, I don't
It
he's
might be on
been this is
Monday, which
interesting. He's been toying with the idea openly because he mentioned it like 3 times now about what if he
yep,
moves his news conference from Tuesday to Monday. That way he can really put the previous game to bed.
which I
I don't
understand, but like
which I get.
whatever.
Yeah, like I
It
don't care.
doesn't like
Whenever they talk, we'll
uh,
be there, John. That's the
yeah.
job. Whenever they talk, we show up.
Yeah, that's what I was joking with Tyler Donahue of Lions 24/7, who does great work over there. Like I said,
Mhm.
like whatever, just tell me where to be and when to be. Like it's
We'll be
fine.
there.
Like I'll show up because Monday, to get to inside baseball now that we're winding down the pod, like I'm pre-writing those days, so I'm doing stuff anyways. I'm just doing it at my leisure. I'll just move that to Tuesday and we'll all adjust, and
We'll
that'll be
survive.
that. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
fine. We
and I
we
think
complain too much for having a fun job.
and you know what, John? If the listeners like what they hear, please don't forget to
Yes,
rate, review, subscribe. And I will say it's been great. I had some nice conversations this week with folks
yes,
who I met in the supermarket, who I met at local establishments, who are enjoying the podcast and reading our work. So please, if you see us, don't be shy. Say hello. We want
absolutely.
this. We want this thing to be fun for you all. Also, after however this thing goes, maybe a little therapeutic after watching this
Yes.
offense. So that's kind
And
of that's our goal.
despite my general aesthetic, I promise I am approachable. Like I know
John is very approachable. Yeah, I am way less interesting in person, but John is very approachable.
yes. But no, I think that's probably a good place to leave it. Like I said, we'll be back some point early this week, depending on what Penn State decides to do with their schedule for us. We will be back as soon as we can with you guys, breaking it all down, leading into Maryland. We'll be at Maryland recording there as well. But yeah, that'll do it. As Audrey said, rate, review, subscribe. It always helps. Follow both of us on Twitter, OddSnyder4 at John Sauber. Read Audrey at The Athletic. Read me at CenterDaily.com. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great day.